Hello， 大家好 ，Welcome to my channel. I'm actually a game nerd and a self-learner of English from China. At the TGA ceremony, Naughty Dog released a trailer for their new game. The trailer provided very little information, only showing the general style of the game and the design of the main character. A bold and very masculine female character. This design sparked a lot of controversy among players, mostly focusing on the issue of DEI influence in games, as well as discussing on the character's appearance, whether she was considered beautiful or not. Later, there was an incident where the actor of the character posted a picture to mock players, and leading to further conflict around these topics. I don't know exactly when it started, but it seems like conflicts between players and creators have been on the rise recently. I previously made a video discussing my view on DEI and woke culture. As a Chinese person, I find it hard to fully understand this ideological and agenda-driven disputes. Chinese players typically don't actively participate in this kind of confrontation. Most of them are just disappointed to see companies that have created many classic games and brought so much joy to players lose their creativity in game development due to such issues. Even if you remove the so-called DEI elements, many of these works can't really be considered exceptional games anymore. Based on my observation, whether people support or oppose DEI, both sides seem to have become increasingly extreme. When players express their opinions, whether good or bad, developers often see them as ignorant bigots or freaks. And when developers express their creativity ideas, even if a character looks a little bit politically correct, it can lead to players launch an all-out attack. The worst case scenario, like Concord, shut down in a very short time, wasting a huge amount of time and money. I really don't understand the growing conflict between developers and players, and I'm not sure what kind of gaming industry and community this will eventually shape. But the whole of interests and ideological issues is definitely something I can't fully explain. But regardless, put all the chaotic stuff aside, the essence and ultimate goal of game developers is to create something that someone will buy. Even if they wanted to convey an agenda through their games, they still need to have people willing to support it. If people aren't interested in the game from the start, or even develop a strong aversion to it, what's the point of developers investing so much time and effort? I'm also a game developer, a Chinese game industry worker, and a gamer myself. In today's video, I wanted to set aside all the ideological issues and simply discuss the topic of the beauty or ugliness of game characters from the perspective of a character designer and a player. First, we needed to define the concept that beauty and ugliness are highly subjective feelings. Everyone's sense of beauty or ugliness is different due to their upbringing, environment, and education. Therefore, this concept can be defined. And even as a character designer with years of experience, I can't provide an absolute standard for beauty or ugliness. So as a player, when I first saw this character, I felt indifferent. To me, she was a very well-crafted, realistic character. Naughty Dog's developers are incredibly talented to a level I can't even reach. And that's unquestionable. For a Chinese person like me, the Western game style has always been like this. I've played all the Uncharted series and absolutely loved The Last of Us, the first one. I also enjoyed the Watch Dogs, GTA series, Red Dead Redemption, World of Warcraft, and so on. And none of the characters from these works were particularly attractive in my eyes, especially in World of Warcraft. There are all sorts of bizarre creatures. Even the elves which in my mind should look like a gallery, don't really look like that. So to me, this bold female character is no different from the other characters in these games. It's just the typical Western style. But I didn't expect it to spark such a big controversy. If I had to choose, I personally lean more towards Japanese game characters. When Japanese developers create the Western-style games, they often make the character more aesthetically pleasing, which aligns more with my preferences. Even in horror games like Silent Hill or Resident Evil, the characters are still very beautiful. But don't get me wrong, what I really wanted to say is that this aesthetic difference doesn't affect the fact that these are all excellent games. And in China, many of them have become classics, providing us with a unique gaming experience from different cultural backgrounds. So even with the DEI issue flaring up, I still don't quite understand why Western players are only now starting to care about a character's appearance or sexual orientation. What's even more difficult for me to understand is when players express these concerns, instead of engaging in positive dialogue with the players, the developers choose to mock and antagonize them, further intensifying the conflict. As someone who's also often criticized by players, I can't understand this behavior. Developers are only a small team of dozens of hundreds of people, and they have to face a huge number of players with varying backgrounds. These players are, after all, the primary customers of their product. Even if developers can't please everyone, there's no need to challenge players' patience. Robert Cialdini mentioned in his book Influence, sometimes we dislike a person or a scene not because of the totality of their qualities, but because of one negative trait or feature that stands out. Once a negative seed is planted, it's hard for positive flowers to bloom. For example, I didn't buy The Last of Us Part 2. As a player, I couldn't accept Joel's fate. Maybe I had done many wrong things and killed many innocent people. Maybe the overall quality of the game was excellent as the previous one, but I just couldn't get past the golf moment. Of course, I'm not saying a game has to be perfect. That's unrealistic. So, as a game developer, should you prioritize personal expression or players' preferences? This is a question that always troubled me. The relationship between players and developers in China is very different from that in the West. In my own work, I'm often asked to design things according to players' preferences. They analyze past sale data to see what types of things or colors are most popular and then continue to produce similar things, and always responding positively to the most vocal players' feedback. This is somewhat like Ubisoft's cookie cutter games, where everything that players like is thrown together, leading to a situation when games become more and more homogenized, and the entire experience feels boring and stale. Players' requests also become increasingly specific and outrageous. In the end, if developers don't comply, they get backlash from players. These options include but are not limited to things like female or male characters can't have lovers. Female characters can't show too much body or too little. Their breasts can't be too big or too small. Female-oriented games can't have female protagonists. Male-oriented games can't have male ones, and so on. We can say that different players groups have different demands, and there are also cultural and ideological differences between the East and the West. That's why I've always believed that trying too hard to please one group of players will inevitably lead to dissatisfaction in another group. And if creators always try to design based on the preferences of players, it severely limits their creative freedom. On the other hand, stubbornly forcing one's own preferences and ideologies into the game isn't ideal either. Either way, it will eventually lead to an antagonistic relationship between players and developers, making the whole industry chaotic. It will also be impossible to achieve goals like diversity and equality. The world will only split into two extremes, and the result will be constant conflict. This is what I see happening right now. As a player, all I want is a game that's fun and engaging. As a character, I hope to express myself freely while also receiving positive feedback and support from the audiences. Achieving a balance between these is very difficult and requires everyone's long-term sincere effort. With the increasingly polarized society, can this even be done? Well, that's all for today's video. I love to hear your thoughts on this. As always, if I said anything wrong or caused any misunderstandings, feel free to correct me. So until next time, stay safe, stay positive, and peace. 再见，拜拜。